Rise, renew, reconnect. Welcome to From the Ashes, a podcast where every story ignites hope and healing.
And the fire in the darkest night, a phoenix burns. It's ready for flight. Shadows may come, try to tear you apart, but you're the flame that
All right,
ignites
everyone,
your
welcome
heart.
back to From the Ashes. I'm your host, Valerie Huang Beck, and today I have my guest here, Erin Resch. So, Erin is a very special guest of mine. She's going to be talking about the environment and living consciously. She's deeply passionate about driving innovation in the food industry while empowering others to embrace healthier and more sustainable choices. And with everything that's going on with the fires, this is such a timely topic. So, Erin's career began with leading roles at Dannon and Challenge Dairy, where she developed a strong foundation in agricultural business development. And a pivotal moment came when she recognized the environmental impact of animal agriculture, inspiring a focus on sustainability and conservation. This shift led to a role as conservation manager at California Water Service, developing expertise in water saving initiatives. And today, she channels this passion into the sustainability movement, driving growth, market innovation, and environmental stewardship. Welcome, Erin, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Valerie. I really appreciate it and looking forward to catching up today.
I am too. You have a phenomenal story, something that's actually very deeply personally moving too. And so I know that this topic is really close to your heart, and I am looking forward to having the audience hear about it. With that, let's begin. And I would like you to start with your From the Ashes story, right? A time in your life where you found yourself questioning everything and where you've chose to fundamentally change the way that you live.
Yeah. So, Valerie, for me, the most impactful and pivotal moment in my life was when I was struggling with the heartbreaking reality of infertility. I had been trying and struggling for over a year and a half. And after countless attempts, not having any success, I realized that I need to take full control of my health in a completely new way. And, I made the decision to really overhaul my lifestyle. I started with my diet and my environment. And I eliminated processed foods. I switched to clean, whole foods based diet. And I made it my mission to remove microplastics. What this meant was really saying goodbye to a lot of the single use conveniences that we're used to on an everyday basis, as well as really reading my food labels and, reading what the ingredient labels were, on all the products that are containing toxins in our everyday life and really investing in sustainable and safe alternatives. And so, this journey wasn't really for me about fertility. It was, but as I was going through the process, it was really a reinvention of how I viewed my health, my habits, and my impact on the planet. And not only did I feel better physically and emotionally, but I also found a deeper connection with living sustainably and toxin free. Right?
Yeah.
This shift, it really helped me achieve my dream of becoming a mom, but it really shaped who I am today. So, it's something that I'm really proud of and, uh, you know, really starting over isn't easy,
Yeah.
but it taught me that sometimes the most challenging chapters are going to lead to the most transformational changes in your life and the ones that are gonna make the most impact, and for me, it did, and, I'm hoping that that can lead to transformational changes with everyone listening today.
Amazing. So let's dig a little bit into that story because I know that usually when people want to change, there's a big problem that they're trying to fix, right? And I know that infertility is definitely one of those, but there are usually indicators, whether that be like physical pain or something else going on your body that shows you there may be something wrong going on. Did you have any symptoms or anything indicating like, you know what, my health is what's the problem right now, or what I'm consuming right now is the problem?
Yeah, what I was noticing was a lot of inflammation, and inflammation is a direct tie-in to, sadly, I did come from the dairy industry. There's a lot of different types of cardiovascular diseases caused by, the toxins that are in our microplastics and also the meat industry, right? You know, after you take a look at the food system and the food chain, there's a lot that's in there. And so what I was noticing is that physical healing needed to happen, right? So I by removing microplastics and toxins, my life, I really reduced the inflammation and improved my overall health. So it really created a strong foundation for fertility and well-being. And so I think that's the biggest change, right? Inflammation. And that's something that every person nowadays, I mean, it's you think about how that's impacting everyone, right? That
Yeah.
affects your entire body, your nervous system, everything, right?
Yes. So let's see. So in terms of inflammation, a lot of people say they're inflamed, and inflammation has a lot of different ways it could show up. And it's not always obvious, but inflammation can be like inflammation in autoimmune. It could be physical pain. It could be all these different things. And my my question to you is like how did you know? Like, did you feel that? Like, or did you see it? Were there physical changes?
Yeah. I mean, I was noticing that my period so it had to do also with my monthly cycles, right? I was usually usually been very regular since I was younger, right? But I was noticing during my period times, the inflammation and the swelling in my body was a lot heavier than it had been growing up, right? Like
Mhm.
when I took a look and I had to do a snapshot of my life and my pain during those important times of the month for me as a female, and I looked back and I didn't recall them being as bloated as to me, it was just a lot more heaviness after my joints felt harder to move, right? There were a lot of things that were indicating to me that something was definitely off in my monthly balances and my everyday living that were all really tied to inflammation. So,
Yeah. And I also want to give a little bit of detail about the dairy and meat industry because I think there are a lot of people who are skeptical or just don't are not aware about the problems in it. And like having studied this a little bit myself, I know especially with like factory farming and all of that, cows aren't being given nutritious food, clean air, water. It's not humane. And then also the way that the dairy is processed makes it harder for the body to digest, right? Like a lot of the homogenization of milk and the a lot of the ultra pasteurizing processes make milk very distinct from its natural form. Can you go a little bit into what you know about that and how that has changed your perspective?
yeah, so for me, it was seeing firsthand the impact when you go to visit a dairy farm, right? So we're shown a lot of videos in the outside, in media on what pasture free means, right? And what we don't really understand is that we a lot of our dairy comes, a good portion of our dairy comes from dairy farms where they are not able to be outside grazing for a good portion of the year, right? California, we're in a different situation, but a good portion of our dairy also comes from the Midwest where you have colder environments, right? So you do know what that means then is that those animals are typically brought in during the winter time, meaning that there's less time outdoors, time when there's more indoors and in a very crowded environment, right? And so that's what we kind of just holistically have to think about when we're thinking about the animal agriculture industry as it currently stands today. And so when, I saw that firsthand, it really hit home for me. I had there was one specific instance of a baby calf being separated from her mother. And so there is a direct link there, right? We should have the capability to tend for our offspring, especially in the crucial first moments of life, and making sure that we can carry that through so that we're creating a community of togetherness and of family shared values, right? We're not enabling our the animal agriculture industry doesn't currently enable that to happen as it stands today, right? And in terms of the animal product that comes from that, the food that you're eating and consuming, you are then eating a lot of, you do consume what that animal experienced, right? The terror of being separated from a mother, the the well-being of these animals living in confined spaces. I mean, how would that feel for any person living today, right? It's just something that makes you have an extra thought of that. No matter what your opinion is on the matter, it's having a wholesome well-being, and I don't think in this current industry we're allowing that to happen in current animal agriculture. And so what that really taught me was that this was something that, we if we incorporate meat and dairy into our diets, how are we doing it in a way that can be giving back to the land that we're producing it on, right?
Yeah.
Right now we currently are doing a lot of monocrop agricultural growing, right? And I think there just needs to be more focus on, the rebalancing of the plate is what I think is really key. So, we are typically very meat heavy, very dairy heavy in the United States. And we've seen the drastic uptick in health consequences that have come from that. You don't see those type of upticks when you take a look at some of the blue zones areas that are across the world, right? So when you take a look at that, I think there's a number of things that need to be present. You need to have a healthy food system. You need to know where your food's coming from. You need to have a good community and a good family that's there to support you. And so when you take a look at that all together, I think that for me was some of the biggest kind of eye openers to why I left the dairy industry and why I decided I needed to pursue, let's focus on plants. I think that's where essentially animals are converting the benefits from the plants for what we are eventually eating anyway, right? We're
Yeah.
just taking a step when we actually get to the source. And when we can do that, we're getting closer to the food that we're eating, making us feel a lot more at home and more wholesome.
I love what you're saying because you're coming from a very holistic perspective and you're looking at, well, how do we as people want to live too? Because, like, we want to live in dignity. And I think we touched upon this a little bit, but some of the core issues aren't always going to be necessarily in, whether we eat meat or not. It's just like how we do it, how we do everything, right? And what we
Mhm.
do in one aspect of things affects all aspects. So this is like a deeper question, but what kind of change are you trying to see in our society, and how do you see us being effective in implementing that change?
Well, the biggest change that we can make is small steps at one time, right? You try to bite off too much, you're going to get overwhelmed and take a couple steps back. So I think the biggest thing I would say is we all are change makers. Start with the easiest lifestyle change you can. The biggest impact we can make as a society would be incorporating more plants, a little bit less meat and dairy, right? So whatever that means for your lifestyle, nobody else can hold you accountable to that except for you, right? So I would recommend starting with Meatless Mondays and seeing if you can find the right lentils, the right legumes, right? The right type of protein. You need to be fueled, but think about where your fuel source is coming from, right? Do you want it coming from somewhere that has a connotation behind it of pain and suffering? That's how I like to holistically look at it, right? Is moving forward, you can make these small changes. You just got to find what's going to work for your lifestyle. If you can't find what works for your lifestyle, you're going to take a few steps back. So that's the biggest one. When you've been comfortable doing that, every single week and consistently, you know the type of food that your body will adapt to really well, then you can incorporate more, right? Go to another day. I like to do tempeh taco Tuesdays. It's one of my favorites. Tempeh is a superfood as long as you're looking at it being produced in an organic form. Soy is a very healthy protein source. You have tempeh is more protein than tofu typically, and it has that fermentation process as well, so it's gonna be really good for your gut bacteria. That would be my next recommendation. You have, Meatless Mondays. Step 2 would be taking a small step to incorporate another day, but you have to incorporate that into your lifestyle and very comfortably. If you can't do that, you will take those steps back. So I'd say give yourself some grace, right? I'm not saying don't ever have meat, don't ever have dairy. I grew up in Chicago. I grew up in eating meat and dairy as a staple in my food group. And, working in the dairy industry, working for the other side, that's where I actually learned so much about the dangers with that. Trust me, I understand how delicious meat and dairy can taste, but what I do know is that your taste buds will adjust. Give yourself 2 weeks and your taste buds will adjust to where you are not craving it, right? The interesting thing about dairy is that it will connect to your brain receptors, and that to me, like, ask anyone how easy it is to give up milk, right?
Mhm.
I guarantee so many people can give up milk or on an easier basis or scale, I should say. It's
Yeah.
easier to give up milk than it is cheese. Now ask them to give up cheese, and that is a big mistake. And what I'm saying with that is cheese is a lot more condensed, right? You have a lot more there that will attach to your brain receptors in terms of it is addicting, right? It is given to a baby calf to help them grow, nourish, and sustain life. It's the exact same with humans for our babies, right? But
Yeah.
we're the only creature on earth where we're feeding our babies another animal's milk. So it's something we might not necessarily need, but with current agricultural conditions, and we've been raised in a lot of countries to adapt to our dependence on milk and dairy, right? So you can do it. Dairy is addicting, and there's a reason. And I would just say to anyone listening, you should do your own research on that.
Yeah.
Think about the next time that you try to go without cheese, how hard it is, and don't you think that's a problem? So yeah, that's a good point 3 would be that. So
I would like to ask you because you work a lot on a policy level and you do a lot of initiative, you're part of a lot of initiatives. So you're looking things at a systemic level. And, one of the things that I noticed about your bio is like you do purpose-driven strategy, right? And so it is looking at how to implement these changes so that they are lasting, so that people are motivated to do them and all of that. And we know just from, you could talk to any person on the street. A lot of the times there is a huge resistance because like they've grown up with meat or they've grown up with dairy. And it's like, how can I change something that is so near good, like, near and dear, I guess, to who I am, right? Like it becomes part of identity. What have you seen be effective? Because I know you do a lot of work in this area.
be effective in terms of
Like,
showing swaps for
yeah, and motivating
meat
change and
and
getting
dairy.
people to be excited about this. Because I think what needs to happen is that people need to be a little bit more interested and excited about making these changes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is that people will make these changes after they've had a serious health risk. So,
Mhm.
typically, it'll be cancer victims or people that have had cardiovascular disease. That's when they really start to take a look at their food intake and the environment around them and the toxins that are in our food system and the microplastics, right? So they'll notice more what's going on there. And what's sad is that we do have a disconnect right now between our health system and and our food system. So, right now doctors don't have the bandwidth right now to go back and re-educate themselves. There's been so many updates to how, a lot of these microplastics and how our food system is directly correlated to the diseases that we're seeing. But, going through and retraining isn't being done as well. It's really up to the doctors themselves, and doctors are already stretched really thin, right? And
Yeah.
so advocating for yourself as a patient is the most important. You're no one's going to look out better for you than you, and you need to advocate for yourself when you are choosing a doctor, when you're looking for a doctor. Those are going to be the most important things that you need to look for.
Mhm.
So those are the biggest things that I've seen is we are held back right now as it currently stands in terms of our education from our doctors and the health organizations backing them, right? The pharmaceutical companies and things like that. The second part I would say is holding us back is the food system. Our food system is very, a lot of the major food companies are really leading what's being sent out to making CDC guidelines, right? Who's supporting that the most? So it's foundationally backwards and it's something that we need to again advocate for ourselves. So those are the two biggest things I'm saying that would hold us back. And so when I can see these grassroots efforts that are being taken to undermine the system, that's what I'm seeing as success. I think grassroots efforts are where it's at and the biggest way we can make a change. Every single person can make a change. It starts with one small step every day. Together, when you think about how much we can do, we can move mountains, right?
Yeah.
So if everyone in the US just went plant-based for 1 month, we would stop the carbon emissions from Google, Meta, Apple, and Amazon all combined for a year. Just if we just did it for a month. So just taking that small little subset, and that's just in the US. That's not even globally. That's just here in the US, right? We can make a change. So that's just one small example of a tiny step that you can do to make a change. But you want to make sure, like, the most fundamental is to do what will work for you. If it can't, you're going to take 5 steps back. So, giving yourself some grace, trying to find the right core food items that are, good staples for you, while also trying to incorporate more vegetables that are different colors, different varieties. You're going to be really nourishing your soul and your growth. So, to as a long-winded response, it's grassroots efforts and really getting back to the core of that every person can make a massive difference.
Amazing. I want to shift our attention because you've mentioned microplastics several times. And so I want to dig a little bit deeper into that, a little bit of the stats that you've mentioned before, and then also linking that to ultra processed foods and why those are problematic, right? I think there's been a little bit more talk in mainstream media about it, but still very hesitant to really warn people against consuming them because it makes industries money, in my opinion. So, can you talk a little bit about both of those and what we should be looking out for? Like, what are the impacts of consuming these foods? And
So, I think the biggest thing first, let me just start with what microplastics is, right? So, microplastics essentially, plastic is really everywhere, it's all around us. The hard part now is that it's so ingrained in our everyday, we don't even notice that we're sick, and it's causing diseases that we can't see, right? We're typically told to go to the doctor when you're sick, but this is a problem that's so macro that we can't even see it, right? Microplastics are essentially plastic that will break down to a small, very small size and will essentially are they're getting into our food, water system, and our airways. They're now found in the human body. So we have to proactively approach the reality of microplastics with how we can realistically fix our food system. And to be honest, we are probably past a point where we can completely fix it. The plastics are going to be a part of our life just due to the sheer amount that has been produced at this point. Every single piece of plastic ever produced still exists in some form today. So, the most plastic can be recycled 3 times, maybe four, but then it cannot be sold in the secondhand market anymore. So, once it doesn't get sold on the secondhand market, you got to think about where that goes. So, it's either going into our landfills where it's getting incinerated, and that's creating particulate matter, which is also a very bad health. uh, a lot of diseases can come from that, respiratory diseases, things like that. Or it's going into our waterways, right? When who eats the fish that are eating the microplastics in the water, right? We are. So making not only our sea creatures unhealthy, but us as well. Or it's just left in a landfill to then create methane. And methane is 20 times more potent than CO2. And it's something that not a lot of people are talking about right now. So, a lot of people talk about fossil fuel or they're talking about CO2, but methane is a very big pollutant that we need to address immediately. That's a little bit of breakdown of what microplastics are, right? And so when they break down this small, it's something doctors really can't see, but you will see the impact and the effects on your body, right? And it's coming out in diseases, it's coming out in our well-being, our anxiety, our depression rates. All of these are really escalating and we're tracking when all this started. You know that there's a direct correlation to the Industrial Revolution. When we started the uptick in production of plastics and fossil fuel extraction, right? And there's a direct correlation to that with our health. That's really the root cause of why, our microplastics are making us unhealthy is that point. We can't discuss that point without understanding our role in that, right? We all and it's not to blame or point fingers. We're all responsible. We all use fossil fuels. Our goal as a community should be to work together so that we're reducing and not requiring as much. As society, we typically need some type of we need plastics in our life. They're actually very important, right? They make cars more efficient. They help in the hospitals, right? There's people that need plastic to live. And that is a very fine balance that we need to walk. Right now, we're wasting our plastic resources and the fossil fuels behind that on unnecessary plastic that's disposable, plastic that should be banned, plastic bags, plastic water bottles, companies that are profiting off of taking the health and the livelihood of our families. So that's something that I think really should be addressed is we all have a very big say in what that means in terms of individual impact and being able to contribute to society in a very positive way. So that's in terms of the microplastics on the health of the human body. What I can say is that in our processed food system, you can do some really great grassroots effort, right? We just had red number 3 was partially just we've been having a lot of challenges in terms of fighting back against a lot of these food additives that don't belong in our food system. We just had a win recently where we finally had a ban on it. It's something that we should be celebrating. And it happened really a lot of grassroots efforts too in trying to make that happen. Things that we've been saying for years are finally happening because we're getting together and we're having conversations on what's in our food and what doesn't qualify as food, which the CDC currently isn't really following a lot of great guidelines on what should be in our food system. So I think we need to talk about speaking up for yourself and advocating for that. When you can do that, we can move mountains. So that's how this grassroots effort has made a direct impact on our food system. And we just need to continue this process going forward. They're doing it in other countries. You see in Europe, anyone that I know that's been to Europe and has traveled and has eaten food there, they feel so much lighter after eating, right? And that has to do with the heavy amount of processing that we're doing in our agricultural system in the US. So, and the food processing system, I should say, in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. I think across the board, I see a lot of plastic just every day outside on the streets, and, I think there's a lot of education that I think that needs to happen, but also, like, remembering what it's like and what kind of environment that you want to live in. Because if you can't imagine yourself living in a clean home environment, you aren't going to take the steps to do it. Um,
Mhm.
but sometimes we feel so powerless, and I think that might be one of the issues is that we feel like we can't control what happens to us. And so I would love to hear what you have done for yourself. What shifts, little changes you've made in your life that have helped you reduce the microplastics in your life, reduce some of those ultra processed foods.
When I looked at removing the microplastics or the plastic, right? I mean, what really turned me on to that was when I was looking in my fertility journey, and I came across an article on the link between plastics and our fertility. And, plastics will really interrupt your endocrine system and your natural body rhythms, right? And I found that really interesting. So, what I thought about with that was just starting small. The biggest thing for me was that I was drinking, I was using a lot of plastic water bottles. That is a direct correlation to there's, I believe, 100 times more microplastics in a plastic water bottle than when can have, I would always say, a filtered water source from the tap. The problem with our water sources right now is that a lot of them are contaminated. So no matter what, I do think it's good to protect yourself and make sure that you do have a good filter that you can use. But I had a really good mindset shift on that one single action, and it was reducing my plastic bottle use. Then I really embraced the process. So I really found some growth isn't linear and setbacks mean failure, right? Every step forward, no matter kind of how small, it's progress. And you have to celebrate your wins to learn your challenges. And so I think that was the biggest thing was really embracing the process. I really just felt better in my life when I could just remove plastic water bottles. Not only did I save money, but I just felt better. I was putting the control in my own hands to understand that I can control everything that goes into my body. And then the third was just trusting myself. I'm really resilient. You are really resilient. And we're really capable of more than we actually realize. So trust that we have the strength to overcome our obstacles and that we have the wisdom to find your way, even if the path isn't clear yet. The fourth thing is really just focusing on what you can control, right? Like plastic water bottles for me was a direct correlation. You do know as long as you have a good filtered water source, you will be able to protect the water, which is life sustaining. And that's so key. So you got to start with your mindset and your environment and incorporating that into your daily routine. And then the fifth that kind of brought me back was always to remember my why. So reconnecting with your purpose or what truly matters to you, whether it's your health, your family, your dreams that you've maybe set aside and have focused on other things, but need to make sure that it's your motivation to take your next step. And then the sixth is just asking for help. You don't have to do it alone. When I found a good community that helped me, it really helped me find loved ones and mentors and a community that helps align with my values. I felt more empowered in my body. And it really helped me move to incorporate all of that to just take these small actions to live every day and a
Yeah.
little bit healthier every day, step by step.
I think that's really powerful. I think personally for me, I don't exactly remember when I started on this journey of conscious consumption, but I do remember I was studying holistic medicine, right? I was studying Ayurveda, and so part of our education is nutrition and mindful eating. And it's funny because, in Ayurvedic medicine, dairy was traditionally used, but what I've realized is that we also have to look at just because it was traditionally used doesn't mean it's best to use it now because looking at the processes that are making the products now, right? That changes a lot of the benefits of consuming something and learning that and knowing that, cows aren't treated the way that they should be and all of that. It's like I I still have hesitation to use dairy very often, even though I do from time to time. I'm very picky about, where I get my milk and all of that, what kind of milk I'm consuming. And it's helped me just be more mindful of what I'm putting into myself and what kind of life I'm creating for myself.
Mhm.
Because I've realized, and this actually goes back to the why part, and it goes back to a little bit of like the self-esteem part too. Is not looking at yourself as trash, and I know that sounds kind of funny,
Mhm.
um, but when we grow up, sometimes we're just like, "Okay, I'll just take what I can get,"
Mhm.
and I think I think it's good to also have a balance of, like, not being so rigid that you can't move along with the world, but then also being very intentional, right, about what you want to create for yourself, the life that you want to live, and how you want to show up for other people too, and the rest of the world. So just sharing a little bit of my journey on that because I think it took me a while for me to really find a joyful balance of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And I think it's especially because you really have to go down deep to get to the motivation that drives you forward, and that's where the foods that you're eating, the environment around you is of the utmost importance every day, and thinking about that, and
Yeah.
how that's there's really a lot of interconnectedness between our environment and what we're doing every day.
Yeah. One of the greatest takeaways I had from studying Ayurveda is like everything has life force. Everything, the
Yeah.
food that you eat can have a life force. And so if you're eating something from a plastic package that's been there, it's like kept quote unquote alive by preservatives, it doesn't really have life force. It doesn't even have like much nutritional value. And so if you're living on that, what do you become? What does your soul become too? Yeah. So I always like to think of those things as like really try to eat things that are living and have that inherent vibrancy to them because you'll end up feeling better. I just feel like more pep in my step and I feel more clarity when I'm eating clean.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to go into some of the initiatives that you're a part of because you're big on creating these movements. You live in the beach cities, and so prior to us starting the recording, I found out that you are a big part of the Blue Zones movement in the beach cities. So, can you talk a little bit about that and what that entails and how people can get involved if possible?
Yeah, so I work with the Beach Cities Health District, which is in the South Bay in Los Angeles. So we really cover a lot of the Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, and Redondo Beach areas. And essentially, we are an organization that is educating our youth and community on what that means to live in a blue zone. And so, blue zone, for anyone who's not familiar with it, we've looked at blue zones are there's six different regions in the world where they're people that are living to be centenarians, where they're living to be over 100 years old, and it's more common in these blue zone areas. So what we've done is we've looked specifically at their health habits, their community and lifestyle, and how they're living so that we can use that as a sample size so that we can take that and extrapolate this. We can help our so that we can help our organizations and our communities live healthier every day. For example, I my son goes to Toledo Elementary School, and at the school, every school has a gardening program. And so Beach Cities Health District will help provide the education for volunteers to go in and educate our youth on where their food's coming from and teach them about composting, help them grow their own vegetables and fruit. And we do a tasting of all of it and really getting them connected to the earth and the food that they're consuming on a daily basis, and really just trying to inspire our future generations so that they can understand what it means to live a wholesome life. And the thing that I love about Beach Cities Health District is their great focus on mental well being as well as wholesome living on this earth. Every single volunteer opportunity I've had when working with the students in classrooms starts off with a well-being mindset where you can set your intention for the education and the experience that we're about to have. And so it's really looking at the process of empowering yourself to make these changes and experience it to its full capacity.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this is an organization that's really moving mountains in terms of community efforts, engagement, and educating our children. And so, it's something I absolutely love. If you want to live to be over to 100, let's figure out how we can bring a blue zone to your area. And you can just go, just look up Beach Cities Health District. It's an amazing process and program, and it's something that really should be in every community. It's something that creates a community and help spread the word on togetherness and being more interconnected with the food and our water systems and the world that we're in.
Absolutely. I think that community driven is so powerful, and the fact that Beach Cities has this is it is unfortunately, it's unique now. I'd love for it to see it everywhere else too. The fact that there is one initiative like this is very inspiring. I haven't read the Blue Zones book myself, but I did watch one of the episodes of Blue Zones on Okinawa, and I've done a little bit of digging into it because I've lived in Japan before, and it's always been one of the more interesting points is like looking at not only do they eat healthier and cleaner, but it is still very holistic, right? I think in the document they talk about how they laugh more, like they take life a little bit more lightly. They farm their own vegetables. They are very mobile because they get off the ground. There's just different factors that attribute to longevity, and it is not just about living longer, but it's about living happier.
Mhm.
That is I think the more powerful part of it. So, yeah, if anyone feels motivated to join the Blue Zones movement, I highly encourage it. And I would love for any listeners out there, if you are part of initiatives yourself, please share those resources with other people because I think one of the biggest barriers is that we don't know where to start with all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. It is, it's all of these together, and I think when we can think about our well-being, getting outside and going for a walk and what that can do to our neurological system is can move mountains, right? And so I think that's where we have to just get back to the foundations of what, how we're here on earth is community, working together, and being outdoors, and that connectedness is really important.
All right, so we're going to finish off the interview, but before we do, I've heard your story before with the fertility and how that the results of that, but I would love for you to tell the audience, what happened and how has life changed since that journey started?
Oh, yes, yeah, so, to just finish off with my story, I guess I never really said, but I did get pregnant, and I went on to have 2 healthy, happy boys, but it was really a great story because I was actually at the day that we had an appointment with the fertility doctor, and after, eliminating plastic from my life and making these really healthy diet changes and lifestyle changes, I found out I was pregnant at the day that we had our appointment with the fertility doctor. And so, and it happened right away with my second. So I have my oldest, his name is Jackson, my youngest is Parker, and all of this really prepared me for the motherhood journey, which is, this whole experience taught me a lot about patience and resilience and what that means in terms of the big picture of why, we have community, have our families, and why we work together, right? Is you can do it. The going is going to get tough sometimes, but you got to stick with it and find that inner strength, and it'll push you forward. So my boys are a blast. They're so fun, balls of energy, and they motivate me every day to learn how I can impact the world and show them how they can do the same just with small changes every day. So
Amazing. Thank you, Erin, so much for being here today. Let's tell the audience where we can find you.
you can go to my website, which is ecoerin.com. You can also find me on YouTube at ecoerin and Instagram at everyday ecoerin. And yeah, just go ahead and do some research. I can help you on your sustainability journey and also just your holistic living on a daily basis. So let's work together, and together we can change our communities. Looking forward to helping you in every way possible.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Erin, for being here today.
And thank you so much for having me on, Valerie. Absolutely love you. And we will move mountains together.